Folks, we are here. We are in tight quarters, and we are so excited to be chopping it up with Delia Ramirez.
Boom, 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 boom.
That's the full gamut of sound effects.
Listen, I need that when I'm walking into that Capitol.
It's useful, right?
It really is. I just felt stronger already.
There you
go. Get off the elevator.
Absolutely. There was just, that actually leads, we don't ask everybody this question, but I do think it's relevant for you. If you could have any animal call be your like walk-up music. So like the elevator doors open, you're heading up to the podium at the front of the chamber. What should be playing? What animal noise would be playing?
I don't know. That horse thing was a good one. I think horse.
There you go.
You're like, listen, you just like, because it's giddy up, right? For the revolution.
Absolutely.
So I think that's what I want.
That's pretty solid.
I mean, I love golden retrievers and my doggies, but the barking probably not. There's enough barking and negative ways over there. No, give me the horse.
Somewhat useful, you know.
Exactly.
And so that's one of our traditions, and we'll start with our other tradition, which is really a ritual, and it's a two-part question centered around time. And so in this time, whether that's this day, this hour, this season, this lifetime, how is the world treating you, and how are you treating the world?
How is the world treating me? I think it depends. The question for me to answer depends on which part of the world we're talking about. But I tell you, I slept really well last night, and I don't sleep really well in D.C. And I think every time I get to come home, every time that flight is landing back in Chicago, my spirit feels at peace.
Are you Midway or O'Hare?
O'Hare.
Okay.
Northwest,
We represent both sides.
Northwest side, Humboldt Park. But every time I land, and I'll tell you, Midway though, you got a better view when you're landing. You're right. You got that. I just feel grounded because this is a place that built me, and so the world in Chicago, that is going through a lot itself right now, is still the world that grounds me every single time. And it's the village that gives me strength to get back on that flight on Monday to D.C. And how am I treating the world? I'm trying to treat the world with love, sometimes with frustration and anger, but also reminded that I have to be present, not just for myself and for those around me, but for the world that we want to create, in a world that constantly asks so much of us and distracts us so easily, sometimes intentionally. So how do I become present to this world and treat the world as it deserves, which is a beautiful place that should be a place of liberation for all of us?
Okay. We have a curiosity. So we're going to obviously talk about policy. We're going to talk about backstory. But just curious for you on like a human level. I don't know if you're into like somatics at all and just kind of like how things show up in the body. But you have a crazy job.
Y'all thought your workplace was wild?
so twofold.
Carol didn't clean the microwave. Well, they're trying to destroy the country.
So on one end, I would claim your colleagues or that space is like at the seat of imperialist power and like harm at some of the highest levels historically imaginable. But then on the other end, there's just like characters, like that maybe aren't even as harmful as they just are ridiculous. And so just talk us through a little bit of like your breath. You're like having to keep decorum. What is it like moving around?
Let's do a little vibe check.
Listen, vibe check. Well, now I'm going to make sure I have a little audio in the back. Like, every time I come out of the elevator. Exactly. But
JBL boombox.
Exactly. And sometimes I'll tell you, the few times that I do actually walk to the office or to the Capitol from home, I have the AirPods on. I got like my hype music going up that hill, sometimes with heels. I do not recommend it. A lot has happened to me on heels in those pebblestone streets. But I got to tell you, there are moments where just like the thing I wore just makes me feel a little more confident. So folks know that in DC, I've been wearing a lot of these cape blazers. And it's not that it's making me stronger, but I kind of feel a little stronger when I wear them. And then I walk into Homeland Security, where we got the characters of, starts with the M, Marjorie.
She was on the list of
the
who
G,
we were curious about.
Green. And I just I walk strong chin up, and I'm only 5'2", you know, there's not a lot of height there to, and I make sure people know that I've arrived.
Yeah.
And while I'm wearing that cape, I have this pin I usually wear, which says Daughter of Immigrants. You're going to spend 3 hours attempting to criminalize and dehumanize immigrants, and I am going to show up with a cape, knowing the assignment. Yes, to push back to your ridiculousness. Yes, to state the facts, but to tell you that I'm here, and I was elected by people to show up and have courage in a space and in a place of bigotry. And that cape just does something for me. Let me tell you, for $49.99, like it really does something for me.
Can they get their official Delia cape?
Exactly. So I've managed. It worked in red. I got it in black. I got it in blue, and I got it in burgundy. But
this might be some good fundraising merch.
I maybe, right? And it's like, listen, we have to be the superheroes of the moment in a place where we are looking around for that leadership or for those heroes. And it's been hard for me, right? Because I grew up with a lot of deep insecurity. My mom joked that when I was in church and we'd go, I was in church, I was one of those accolades, the ones that would carry the candle through the aisle. She said, Delia, you walk down, like looking down to your feet, and you're speeding, like you're speed walking. Like look up once in a while. You know, and heard like you're like that girl from the mountain that came down to town for the very first time. So I've always had a lot of deep insecurity. I was always afraid of speaking in public, and that's all I have to do now, right? So sometimes that cape makes me fake it when I'm not feeling as confident until I make it in that room.
I feel like over the months and years, that cape is just going to get longer and longer, and until it's like full Batman cape length.
Yeah,
you know,
we can't get too long because I'm short, so I don't want to
There
trip
you
over
go.
it, right?
Exactly.
So, something you're speaking to, we talk a lot with movement folks, and there's always this like bridge between like grounded task work and then performance. And I think sometimes that word performance can come off as like a pejorative, but for us who also see culture work as really important, a lot of what the job is not always the task management. It is the performance. And like how much of that was a surprise, or how much of having to carry the weight of the symbol of what you have to step into versus the actual like day-to-day interface.
Policy, writing, and sentences,
Especially now.
Yeah.
There's an expectation for you to perform. When mayors have to go to hearings and they're expected to perform, and then you got folks asking, how do you think the mayor did? Why are we asking our mayors to perform? Why are we asking ourselves to perform? Where is the real, and where is the real, and what's the difference between performance and being, right? But no, you're absolutely right. I think that this is one of the biggest challenges for us, and for me, is I show up in 15 to 18 to 20 things a day, right? Hearings, press conferences, votes, speeches, shaking hands, meeting this person, this organization. For them, this issue is the most important issue, and so is my 2 o'clock and my 2:30 and my 3 o'clock. And you know, having that moment of take a deep breath, realign, and this feeling that you have to be able to perform your best and be fully present for them, and then do it again 15 more times that day. It's real, and I actually think that it's this idea of dehumanizing us, right? And these expectations that, as someone that is representing in this particular way, particularly for us people in movement, like it's stripping us from our humanity, and it's intentionally designed to do that. And I really, I'm challenged on that, because I got to be honest with you. There are days that I'm like last night, I ended up in another event, had one more thing. My day had started at 7 a.m. in D.C. It's 9 p.m. in Chicago. And I have to show up and walk into a room with thousands of people, take a deep breath, perform for 20 minutes, shake hands, smile, take pictures, and then finally get in a car to go home and rest after the craziest week I've had. But I got to tell you this is the most interesting part of that. I had no intention. I didn't think I'd have to speak and go into this thing. I didn't have remarks. So I went up there. I said 2 things. I'm at an organization I don't really know much of, and sometimes it's not really aligned with our movement. So I just showed up, said a few words, and I walked out. And then this woman comes up to me as I'm leaving, and she said to me, I needed to be here because of you. I needed to see you.
You're like, man, I wasn't even on my A game.
All I'm thinking is I wasn't even in my A game. I don't even think I said anything inspirational.
I didn't bring
up
out
there,
the
right?
hits.
But she said to me, I'm a civil engineer from Mexico. I've been here for 7 years. And I nearly died. And I'm a cancer survivor. And I've been wondering how to show up fully myself. You went onto that mic in this room, showing up fully who you are. And you've inspired me. And I need you to know that you've made a difference in my life. And so I tell you that even when we think that we're in this space where the world requires you to perform, that there is always someone that is looking. And there's pressure in that. If you don't show up, you may end up harming, right, movement. And if you, like, that there's a pressure and expectation of who you are and how you show up. And oftentimes that's despite of how your humanity is feeling in that moment.
And I think you're speaking to, like, on a personal level what that does, but I also think it's part of the effect of a structure of representation, right? Of not in the, like, Hollywood way, though there's that part too of, like, seeing, you know, for this person it was important to see someone move in that way, but also of, like, our political system of, like, government.
That's right.
Then you're holding however many hundreds of thousands of people that you are the symbol for.
How many people are in your constituency?
The census says 757,500. I probably have about 1 million.
Okay.
And so I love how much you keep coming back to the ways that that's dehumanizing on many levels, because I also want to talk about the very human side of your work, right? And so this I'm going to loosely frame as a thank you. So it was like 3-ish months ago. It was after the election, but before the end of the year. A family member who has been in this country for 35 years, who came and was undocumented and then got legal residency, went through the rigmarole and finally received citizenship. And the ceremony was like end of November. And, you know, that was exciting, and we held all the contradictions and went downtown, and I was talking with my wife about, like, the difference between how a big American flag makes you feel and how a tiny little one makes you feel.
There's
like, there's a real different vibe between tiny little flag and big dominant flag.
The verse says USA,
USA. Like, just a bunch of people with a little tiny little flag. I was like, you know what? This is a different vibe.
A little bit more discreet.
I know, a little bit.
But basically, to make a long story short, this person went through the ceremony, but what we learned happens is that, you know, they've had this documentation. They took that, and then we're waiting for the passport, basically, to then have
the ability to travel. Finally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so in that little window where all of a sudden, yes, they are technically now have citizenship, but they are quite technically, tangibly like they have no document.
Have the document.
There was a health crisis in Mexico with their family that they knew they were going to have to be there for. And so I'm giving this context to say, like, these are the kinds of just complications that happen in people's lives that are hard regardless, but that our system makes so much harder for people to navigate. And so the reason this is a thank you is because the day of the ceremony, we looked up who was his representative. We called your office, and within 3 days, he had his passport.
Oh.
And so he was able to go and take care of his parent who was in their last days. And so, one, that's just a thank you and an example of, like, a good use of having someone to call in that moment.
That's right.
And it also, I bring it up to say, like, there's what's happening on the other end of that flight, and then you come home the weekend and you're moving through all these, you know, through a long day schedule. For those of us that aren't spending our week in that building, what are we not seeing or understanding about what's happening in there in this moment?
First, let me say to you, thank you for sharing. And for me, it is so important to hear those stories because it brings me back of why we do what we do. Because there are days that I am sitting in D.C. and I'm in a debate or I'm in a caucus meeting that I'm like, what the hell am I doing here?
Yeah.
These are the very same people who campaigned on one thing, but the money and politics that bought their seat makes it impossible for them to actually have courage and lead in this moment. And so have to. I want to introduce this legislation. I want to see Medicare for All passed. I want to make sure that we have comprehensive immigration reform. And here I am in a place that doesn't seem to move that way. It is those stories that remind me that the work that we do is so much bigger. I've been intentional about having a district office that has staff who worked in direct services. Our district director has a master's in social work. And so does my chief of staff, right? That they actually understand that I grew up with a congressperson that I never really knew, and that my family never knew that they could actually go to in a time of need. I want my office to be the place you go to in a time of need, both on the policy side and on the direct service. So thank you for sharing that.
Of course. And I do just recommend for all listeners, anything passport related, go to your congressperson.
Yes, that's right. Go to
We've had other Congress passport
situations.
Help,
So shout out to Claudia.
And shout out to Claudia. And if your passport expires in the next 6 months, make sure you get it renewed before you travel out of the country.
Right. Especially right now with the really crazy State Department.
Just a little PSA.
Yes, that's right. Just a little public announcement. But some of us go through layers of microaggressions the entire time we're there. And Damon, if I'm being very honest with you, I can take some of the stuff that I get from some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. Because they actually will look at me and tell me, I don't think you're worthy. I think you're only here because of DEI. I think as a woman, you shouldn't lead. I think as a daughter of Guatemalan immigrants and a wife of a formerly undocumented DACA recipient, like, why are you here? Like, I can take it because actually, they kind of tell you to your face. It's my colleagues on this side, and some of them have a similar last name to mine, that hurt the most. It's the people that tell you that they're with you and remind you that not all skin folk are kinfolk, that to me are the most frustrating people to work with. Is the people that self-sabotage because they got their own so others don't have to. To me, that's the most frustrating thing that I see in DC. And to watch, someone asked me recently, Congresswoman, if you had like a little magic wand and you can change one thing in Congress right now, what would you do? Yeah, of course I want peace in the world. But here's what I said to them. I would want to get money out of politics. Because if y'all really follow it, if you really want to ask yourself, why is it that these insurance companies get away with it? Why does pharma get away with it? Why does NRA get away with it? Why do we love guns more than children? Like, why is it that when it comes to Palestinian lives in Gaza, they don't seem to matter in the same way that other things matter? It's money and politics. It's colleagues of mine who, when they're about to vote, they're making phone calls to check with whoever bought them to see if they can vote that way. So to me, the most frustrating aggression is to watch how money controls our ability to lead.
That's a macroaggression.
That's a macroaggression, right? Coupled with all the microaggressions that come from those that actually seed that from that macroaggression. And to me, the most frustrating part is when they look at you like, oh, you're so naive. Yeah, we all want that, but it's not going to happen, Delia. Be patient. Our folks are damn tired of waiting for representation that's actually going to deliver for them. Especially when how much more patient do I have to be in being poor? I've been poor for 35 years. How much longer, right? And I think to me that's been the most frustrating is the condescending, patronizing way that sometimes my own colleagues that say they share my values act when I challenge them to look at themselves in the mirror and remember why they're there.
Well, thank you for that. And I want to build right off. How do you develop a strategy to like maneuver that? Because I would say our base and audience is wide, but if I would sum it up, I think it is folks who are, in a long-term sense, invested in radical transformation of political formation and like what governance means, not just in the U.S., but I think globally.
That's right.
And there is, one, a strong will to organize and participate, but also an even stronger despondence around the reality of what our representative government looks like, especially at the federal level.
That's right.
And so I think there is this long-term, we are early 30s, so over our lifetime, and I'm sure the history also goes before us because the world started before we were born, but that doesn't count in the same way. In my lifetime, there's always been this push of we get the progressive, the community informed, the like movement adjacent person in power, and either they maybe reveal themselves to be insincere or lack integrity, or these power dynamics, these funding structures crush the possibility, and then pragmatism pushes them towards being centrist. And so for folks who want insurgency, real like grounded, but like tangible resistance to this trajectory of money in politics. One, how do you see yourself maneuvering that over multiple terms? And what does grassroots support, activation, mobilizing look like in the intermediate to like address this long-term thing you're facing?
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why I'm the first Latina in the Midwest in Congress.
Really?
The first Latina. And the only, as of right now.
Those first things, that used to be so cute a little ago.
Not.
It's so not cute
the fact
anymore.
It's 2025 and we still are celebrating first or trying to attempt to get that. But then you have a president, thank you,
yeesh.
and then you have a president that wants to make sure that there's no more first, right? Or there's onlys and then get rid of or buy out onlys. Yeah. Or last. Or maybe he's trying to build the last and we're trying to build the first so we get more. But then the other part of it is like, yes, I'm the first Latina. But the kind of Latina also matters. And I think that when we talk about identity politics, I think it's also important to have those deep conversations,
and I'll
right?
also add
that it's
in Black
more
representation
than that.
as well.
That's right. That's right. That's exactly right. Right. And in Black, Latino, working class families, like we have to ask our questions: what values is this person coming in with, and who are they surrounding themselves to ensure that they're staying accountable and also supported? Because it's both. Yeah, you can be generally very supportive of me. And all of a sudden, because I'm the first or because I came in as a progressive Latina, you're not going to check me when I seem to be moving center. That's a problem. But also, you need someone. So you need the accountability and you also need the support. And for me, that's been really important. I mean, my campaign slogan is rooted and ready. And now we say receipts, right? That you can be progressive, you can be ready to fight, and you can also demonstrate that progressives can govern. To me, it's really important to show that, because what you've seen and what you're seeing from a lot of these fascists, but also these moderates, is this argument that progressives may win elections, but that we can't govern. And we have to be able to demonstrate,
which is a moving of the goalposts.
Exactly, absolutely, right? That we could actually do both. And that it requires for us to understand that the onlys and like sensationalizing certain people and thinking that only these 2-3 people can do this is also a problem. I need more people like us in Congress. And it's a lonely place. There's a few of us. And every one of us is trying to live up to the expectation of what the world or socials expect us to be. And that's also unrealistic, right? But I think the other piece of that is like, if we are truly going to transform this nation and transform globally, we have to see money and politics as the pure evil and the impediment of transformation. And it means that, I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican, Independent, we have to be asking ourselves, is this person elected because they were the most qualified and most representative of that district, or because this person was able to self-fund or had those super PACs who were able to create a narrative of this person and fool their constituents into believing that they represent them?
Or just inundate
we
them
just
with images.
move different. Because I'll tell you, I tell people, yeah, you want me to just sit here and be quiet, but I don't know if you understand who brought me here. The movement that brought me here didn't send me here to be quiet and wait my turn.
Fairly loud.
Fairly loud, right?
There's nothing else.
They expected
bullhorns involved.
That's exactly right. It's why
makers.
like over 150 people on January 3rd, when I was getting sworn in, showed up to DC. Yeah, my name is on that placard, but they all went to Congress with me. And so I'm responsible to demonstrate to them that I'm accountable to them. And so they're watching what I do. They're watching what I say, and they're also saying to me, I know that when you say ceasefire and you're among the first 5 to say it, we're going to have your back. Not just on doors, but making sure that small donors, grassroots donors, understand that we only change this system when we collectively build the circumstances that allows people to represent us based on courage, values, and issues, and not just how much money they can bring. And that's hard.
Yeah.
Because I still have to spend 10 hours a week making calls to people who don't answer my calls often, asking them to invest in what we're building.
Right.
What would it look like if I didn't have to do that?
Right. And so this is one of the like great imbalances that has led to the political shit show, I will say, that we are currently in, right? Is there's a 400 plus year trajectory, but in this particular moment, there is someone with more money than God who did not go through an electoral process, who is making decisions about structure of the state under which we all live.
Yeah, he's not an unelected bureaucrat, as Donald
Right.
Trump likes to say. He's just an unelected billionaire,
Right.
almost trillionaire.
Who's doing administrative work. So that
Exactly,
sounds a
so
little-
like
but yeah.
kind of bureaucrat.
And so, you know, we are sitting here, we're recording this in early March. We're sitting in Chicago trying to balance how much sensationalist news we take in, what stories are the thing we hold.
Are we at the messy room moment?
Sure, let's be at the messy room moment. Yeah. You want to, extend this.
Yes. No, I'm sorry. I cut
No,
you
you're
off
good.
of like just how extreme this time is. We recently talked to a brilliant organizer and strategist and writer, Asha Ransby-Sporn, about what it means to stand up in this face of overwhelm. And so there are two things happening. There's like just, again, the shitstorm of more or less evil messaging that is really overwhelming. But then there's also a legislative slate of so many things that it's really hard to keep up with.
Right.
And for a lot
And
of
then there's executive branch maneuvering outside of the legislative, but still within the realm of what's being pushed as policy.
So recently in a staff meeting came up with the messy room analogy. If you got a messy room and your clothes all over the place, you could get depressed, you could be avoidant, it could be too much, like, I don't feel like dealing with like this. And my mom was always big on make a pile. Take all the clothes that's everywhere, take all the stuff, put it before you, and then you can see it. And then the steps of like what we actually are dealing with.
I can put away
have to
5
address.
shirts.
Yeah, I can
you know?
fold these socks instead of addressing just my room is a mess. And so
The world is on fire.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
because
yeah.
it's on fire, there's nothing I really can do.
yeah. So basically our question is what the hell is actually going on? Like what's
Like,
happening right now?
Not
what
what
is
are they saying they're going to do, not what is the messaging, like on a tangible level, governmentally, like what are they actually doing? What is actually happening?
They're attempting to end free and fair elections. They are working towards ending democracy as we know it in this country. You and I both know that the democracy that we currently have isn't good enough, but they're trying to end whatever we do have. There's nothing around expanding. They're making sure that women, and particularly Black and brown people, are unable to vote in 2026. And they're going to try to pass the bill called SAVE Act to do that.
Okay, and what's in that bill? Yeah.
So SAVE Act requires that you prove that you're a United States citizen in order to vote. Well, only United States citizens can vote. And they're saying you have to be able to prove the last name that you have through multiple forms of identification. If you're one of the 70 million women who have changed your last name when you got married and your birth certificate says one thing, because it says that you were born in Chicago, you're born wherever, and your ID says another, you will not be able to vote. If you're a veteran who has a veteran ID, but you don't have a real D that says a United States citizen, which most don't, and you don't have a working passport, you will not be able to vote.
On the last name change, is that a downstream like unintended consequence?
No,
or
that's an intended consequence in your face. But what they say is we have to make sure that immigrants no longer vote in our elections, because the only reason that these cities are these cities have these democratic leaders is because immigrants are voting in those elections. They have decided that the word that they could use is border, and then the other is immigrant. And if you use those two words, that they have spewed enough hate that Democrats themselves will vote for these bills. And the truth is, Democrats have voted for these bills because some of these bills were actually introduced last Congress. They didn't pass the Senate because we had the Senate and the administration wouldn't have approved it. But what I tell people is you have to understand that this is not about immigrants. This is about voter suppression. And in this case, it is about due process and your right to vote. Stop allowing them to use and continue to use immigrants as an excuse to be able to take your rights away. But here's the second part of it, if I'm being very honest. There is a persecution of immigrants in this moment in this country. This is radical. I wear a pen that says daughter of immigrants, like in a place that would like to deport me. And I was born in Cook County Hospital, right? And Democrats have done an awful job in defending immigration. We're apologetic about it. And so therefore Republicans have realized the gotcha moment isn't reproductive health. We actually didn't do well on that, y'all, so let's not talk about it. You notice that Donald Trump at the State of the Union did not bring up abortion because it's a losing argument
That's
for
not
him.
what the executive orders were about.
Exactly. But what have Democrats been unapologetic in defending? reproductive health.
Right.
What would it look like if Democrats were unapologetic about defending immigrants, defending diversity, equity, and inclusion, defending things like, like basic human rights, like Medicare for all possibly, or affordable housing? It would change the way they talk about that. They have realized that Democrats are the weakest when it comes to immigration, and that when shoved to a corner, shove like this. You don't see me, but I'm like pretty tight here to the table.
We gotta squeeze in.
Squeeze in when you sometimes squeeze the table.
You should bring us in for interior design.
I think I am. I think maybe we'll be more effective. That they will vote against their constituents, and when it comes to issues like immigration, even if it's a civil rights issue, a due process issue, or a voter suppression issue, somehow enough Democrats will give the Republicans the votes they need to pass these bills. And they're dangerous.
Thank you for unpacking that. I want to go deeper in this notion of what true support for immigration looks like, because I don't think we've actually had that modeled at the national level. I think we have what defense looks and sounds like. But, again, the forefront, like at the radical edge of believing that borders themselves are harmful carceral institutions, and we need to organize a world that is not dependent upon these militarized borders to govern humanity. Full stop. I tried to say that so that you don't get aggregated in ways that, that get you in trouble.
Because I serve in Homeland.
So I tried to make my point while being
Very
careful.
politically correct.
And so I know that that's not represented at all in the halls of Congress as a real conversation. So what is actually what is the window of what's an acceptable defense of what pro-immigration
What was
should
the
look
term,
like?
Jared? What was it? Sanction narrative? Like, what is the edge of the sanction narratives of what immigration could look like?
Well, first let me say to you, I think we need to ask ourselves, do we believe that people have the right to movement globally?
Right.
Do people have the right to move from one place to the other for whatever reason? Yeah. And number two, does this country believe that people have the right to seek asylum? What you are seeing right now is an answer to no.
Right.
That no, we are not that country on that Statue of Liberty that we talked about. Not no more. Because these are different kind of people seeking asylum versus the ones that came
then there
in
were
the
people
1800s and 1900s,
right? It was a lie then.
A little different, a little lighter.
And there was a political pushback to that political position that led to 40 years of basically closed borders unless you're from Northern Europe.
That's exactly right. The other is, if we don't want people to be trafficked, if we truly care about women and children who are seeking asylum and experiencing all of the horrors at the Darien or at the southern border, then what role do we seriously take in legislating the kind of policy that creates legal pathways for people to seek asylum? You have the president of this country now talking about, forget green card, the thing that my husband just got. We're about to give millionaires gold cards. I mean, in your face, he's telling you, oh, migration, immigrants, oh, if you're rich, come on in.
Right.
Like, he has definitely told you who he cares about in every way. We can talk about that in every single
area. And again,
area.
there is also precedent for that outside of this moment.
That's exactly right.
When you look at where people from Southeast Asia, who was allowed to come in, you had to have certain degrees.
That's
there
right.
were certain types of visas.
Those special visas that we still have now. Because the legal pathways that we in fact have, Damon, are only for specific people that fit certain criteria. An education criteria, a professional licensing criteria, if you're a doctor, if you're a nurse. I mean, it's really to say, if you are working class and dying and need a place of refuge, this is not the place for you. So we need to have a real conversation. Do we care about legal pathways or not? Because if you do, let's say that, and to our moderates that say that, what are you doing to create that? Right. If you actually say you care about these women and you don't want to see little girls coming out of the Darien after experiencing all the horrors, then what are you doing about it? But I think the other piece of that, let's just be honest, $100 billion. That is what undocumented immigrants contribute in federal taxes every single year. So for the people that are saying they're taking all of this from us, they're paying taxes. They can't get any of those tax benefits back because our federal law precludes them from getting those benefits.
You know who paid no taxes last year?
Oh, I know who paid no taxes,
exactly.
Right? And you know who's about to get a $4.5 trillion tax cut right now in the CR? It's Elon Musk. It's Jeff Bezos. It's Mark Zuckerberg and Donald Trump and his cousins and his kids. That's who. So I think that we really have to ask ourselves, did immigrants take your jobs? Did immigrants make it impossible for you to be able to purchase your home? Are immigrants to blame for the fact that you can't go to college? Are immigrants to blame for the fact that you can't afford to put your kids through school? It's corporations, it's billionaires, and it's the people who have been bought in Congress to make it impossible for you to thrive. And we have to have a real conversation about that. But we, I think Democrats, and I think us as movement people, more than Democrats, have to be unapologetic about calling it what it is. It is an attack and a bullying of those who have been marginalized by this nation and this world. Because let me tell you, those, if you actually look at it also, up until a couple of years ago, who was getting deported at the quickest rate? It was Black immigrants from Haiti, right? Or from Congo. The reality is that all of this is seated in white supremacy, in colonizing mentality that we have allowed to create the policies in which has divided us in this moment. And I worry when they talk about defunding our cities, when they talk about removing the SBA, the Small Business Administration office in Chicago. How long will cities like Chicago hold it down before we are fighting each other for the crumbs when we should be demanding that this government, where we send $6 in Illinois for every dollar we get back, actually honor the contributions we make to this nation?
Yeah, and what you just said of the precarity of how long we can hold on in the face of that barrage is something I've been thinking a lot about, specifically in regard to the response to deportation threats. So,
and how it will destabilize our economies.
Well, there's that too, not to mention the human side of things. But yes.
Yeah. I mean, some people have forgotten the human side of things, right?
So you got to speak in dollars.
Yeah,
but
just like on some economics, this is labor that is contributing.
That's the reason.
You're worried about cost of construction, you're about to see it more.
Right.
You're worried about the fact that you don't have enough people in hospitality, you're about to see more of it.
You're
worried about children committing suicide, you're about to see more little kids like the girl in Texas who committed suicide for being bullied and told that when she'd go home, her parents would be deported. And cost of eggs and avocados.
The reason those things are low is because of the extraction, right?
That's right.
Which is already harmful, which shouldn't be the thing, you know?
Well, and Damon, the exploitation of workforce as well, because I think that's the other thing, right? These immigrants have been exploited in agriculture, in manufacturing, and mistreated. And so, who is the common denominator that is doing this, that is divesting in our Black communities, who continues to make it impossible for people to thrive? It is corporations, it is greedy politicians, it's billionaires, and the capitalism that has always kept us down.
Yeah, and so in naming that these structures that are now under threat to be completely dismantled were only there because of the extraction in the first place, I want to talk about. I want to jump back to that precarity you named because a few weeks ago I went to an ICE Watch training it was actually at Palenque at LSNA, and there've been a bunch of organizations all over. Absolutely,
that's where my leadership comes from.
And, there was just a lot to learn. So I was very appreciative of excellent trainings in this. And I know there are people doing this all over the country, all over the city. And so much of the tangible trainings is about what to me feels so precarious, which is this divide between the work of CPD and the work of federal immigration officers, which is, there is 40-year legal precedent for it in Chicago. This is all the way back to Harold. But
Harold. Yeah, that's right.
But as someone whose entry point into movement was understanding the harms both individually and then structurally of policing and prisons in our city, it feels so fraught to me, this idea of if you can see this type of badge, then you have nothing to worry about because these worlds will be kept separate by these ordinances, right? And so that's what's under threat right now. That's why Brennan was forced to go, perform. And so partially I'm asking from a place of anxiety, but from where you sit, is there anything that we should be doing to not take that tactical divide for granted? Other than just relying on it in our work to protect our neighbors, what should we be doing in this moment where it's under threat to make sure that we can try to protect this thing that feels very fraught to me of the cops don't participate with ICE?
Mm-hmm. I think that our movement has to ensure that those that control and legislate our ability to continue to, one, have a sanctuary city, and two, to respect and honor the Trust Act, don't repeal it. I'm going to be very honest with you. I think that our folks in City Council and I think people in the General Assembly are feeling a lot of tension because what's happening at the federal level is beginning to seep in real ways.
Yeah. And it's usually so chill in City Council, you know.
So chill. Always has been, right? Especially when
very
we have
especially
when we have progressive leadership. Very chill, right?
Just beat up, you know.
Our folks want to make sure they do everything they can so that our progressive leadership is able to govern.
Talk about a vibe check. City Council, listen, that's a wild vibe.
That's a wild, I'm telling you. But be honest, I think we're in the same place in Congress.
There you go.
How's your City Council and your Congress are now the same? Like, and just using every moment to think about how they can create a viral moment and attacking each other. Not bringing unity, not bringing solidarity.
Think about it.
They're
like influencers
yeah,
at this point. They're just trying to get content off.
No, y'all are already influential.
Yeah, exactly.
Things are better when it was just on C-SPAN and nobody was watching.
Right? Listen, no one, know it. I wasn't watching until now. I do watch. Now I do watch.
Their jokes off.
No, but I gotta tell you that movement has to thank those that are holding the line, because we need to hold the line in Chicago and in Illinois, and then we have to do everything we can to create a space where we're talking to each other. Mm-hmm. I am really scared in how this black-brown divide continues to seep in to folks that should be alongside fighting together for our collective liberation. Because someone is telling us that you are in the circumstance you are because of the other. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you see it in City Council. You're seeing and feeling the racial tensions in the General Assembly. And you have a president that thrives on creating this. Mm-hmm. And I really worry that if we don't, as movement, call our progressive movement to come back to each other, to have the honest, real conversations that are required about how we have harmed each other, right? In this attempt of trying to build or do or defend, like, we need to actually talk about how we have sometimes done this harm and how we now find a place of restoration so that we can come together. If we don't do that soon, we are going to see them attempt to break us. Mm. And their strategy and their number one priority is to break us. This whole sanctuary city thing wasn't about sanctuary cities. This was an attack on 4 of the most successful cities in the nation, where we have proven that diversity, that equity, and inclusion actually works. That these cities have among the highest GDP, not just in the country, but globally. Chicago has the 22nd highest GDP in the world. These are also the cities that will be the act of resistance to a fascist leader. Mm-hmm. If you destroy these cities, then you allow and ensure that a fascist as Donald Trump and those that come after can continue to divide us and to take our country from a country that should be, hasn't been, but should be a country that honors the differences and the collective movement. It's intentional. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you the last thing of this, and I said this to folks. I don't know if you were cheering on the mayor or not cheering on the mayor or hoping the mayor would fail or trying to prove a point with the mayor. You should be cheering on Chicago every single damn day. Because an attack on Chicago is an attack on the collective that we believe that diversity, that equity, that inclusion actually is what makes this country, what could make this country great, right? And this idea of performance BS that they want us to do, we should be pushing back on this performance. Because you're never going to win in a witch hunt. Mm-hmm. Right. It's a witch hunt for a reason.
Right. And the tactic, which we've seen centrist Democratic figures take of, we're going to, yesterday from when we're recording is when Gavin Newsome did his performance around trans athlete, this tacking to the middle and then to the right of the middle. with what they did in the presidential. Like that is a losing gambit. As you said, like the people who win elections are people who actually run on tangible, common sense, progressive platforms that are widely popular among Americans across demographics.
Daniel, I won by 42 points in a 4-way race against a moderate city councilman who spent equally or more than I did.
Right.
I didn't just beat him. I beat him by 42 points. And so I think it's important to your point that
Talk
you
your
could
shit.
actually, listen, I'm going to start bragging right now, just in case, you know? But I'm just saying, like, it's true.
I'm going to start putting funk flex horns in.
That's right. Like, yeah. But I think you're right. What I do worry is that we're hearing it again. The reason that Democrats lost was because of the left.
Yeah.
No, the reasons we lost is because we failed to convince the American people that we're fighting for them. Because we weren't fighting for them enough.
Yeah, it's not just you couldn't convince them. It's that they didn't do it. No. It's not a messaging problem.
The reason is because you have a bunch of elitist people trying to act like they know what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck.
Right.
No, you don't.
You know what I always think about? You remember when John Kerry was running for president and he said, "Who amongst us doesn't love NASCAR?" I always think of that as like the perfect encapsulation of what you're talking about, you know?
Yeah.
But it's like, you know, this like you're not even good at pandering.
Yeah,
No.
And it's clear to your like thesis throughout that there are these moneyed third rails, that there are conversations you won't even have.
You won't have, because if you have them, then you're actually like all of a sudden you're worried that this group is going to come after you and is going to spend not $100,000, but in some cases $28 million to unelect a progressive who represents his district, like Jamal Bowman in New York. We've seen Corey Bush
in St. Louis.
I mean, but also like, what does that mean to our movement? Where now I have to compete against $10, $15, $20 million just to make sure that I can continue to do the work that you send me to do.
Yeah.
So to that of like, I hear you saying this push of we need to fight and that you've been sent to do work. And again, there's this like tension of participation versus like wanting to have other efforts outside the electoral arena to build grassroots power. And so I'm curious from you now being in this space and, you know, in some ways having infiltrated what is usually the target or seen as what we're opposing.
Yeah, that's right.
Not in the way they infiltrated, for the record.
For the record, y'all.
Or electorally infiltrated. From now your vantage point, it's not an assignment because that wouldn't maybe necessarily be inappropriate, but a little like secret, like, hey, this door over here is unlocked. Like, what is, where are the pressure points? Yeah. What are like, oh, if somebody activated in this way, or if there was a petition for this, or if this issue that folks aren't really looking at with enough heat or intensity made it to my doorstep, I could maybe fight with more vigor.
If I could be like, no, they're out here talking about this.
Yeah, so what are some of the things that like you wish there were more heat on the street to be proverbial?
Basically, heat on the street is 200,000 of my constituents depend on Medicaid to get their health care, of which 97,000 of them are children. Elon Musk, in the budget resolution and in the CR that's about to come, wants to take your health care.
What is a CR, just for
Yeah, thank you. Listen, sometimes you become insider on this.
Some acronyms.
I know, and I was like, oh my gosh, no, Lord, no. I've become one of those, no. It's a continued resolution, which actually means that they just continue to fund the government at whatever level that it's been agreed. They're talking about a clean-ish. The ish part of it is that they're going to cut a bunch of Social Security, a bunch of Medicaid, Medicare, and SNAP benefits. So how do we mobilize our working class movement?
Elder care, food, housing, and healthcare.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. This is not just this thing out there. They're coming for your roof. They're coming for your food, and they're coming for your healthcare. And you should be asking everyone that represents you, what the hell are you doing to hold the line and protect my 3-4 issues, right? My 3-4 things: my food, my shelter, my housing. And I think it's going to be really important. And then this other thing, I'll be honest with you, I'm sick and tired of hearing us say, oh, Democrats are in the minority. I'm sorry I did that. I don't know. I think Donald Trump just brings out sometimes.
You're doing voices now.
I'm doing voices now, right? But like,
I'm sorry. I have to ask a question. You don't have to answer this. which congressperson has the best Trump impression?
Which congressperson has the best?
Because I can imagine y'all are doing impressions.
We are, but you know who I thought did a really good job recently? Maxwell Frost from Florida.
Yeah.
That was a really good one.
All right, thank you.
And then I found myself in the State of the Union. I was trying to stay serious, but I started just doing it myself. And I was like, crap, I hope the camera didn't get me.
You're like over there doing the little hand
We're
move.
reaching the golden age. I was like, oh my God, for everybody. With the lip. But what I was going to say to you is like, we got to stop saying that we're in the minority and we have to start acting like the opposition party. Every time a democracy has been threatened all over the world, the party that is trying to defend or preserve democracy is the opposition party. Act like opposition, not like minority. Because in this idea of like, you're the minority party, we have no power. Yeah, you have power. You still have oversight. Why are we still voting for some of these suspension bills? I don't care if your post office name change happened or not. Because this Republican member wants to change his post office in his district. You want to change that post office name in the district? I want to save Medicaid.
Right.
So until you vote with me, I ain't voting for your post office name change. Like, we have to actually start like acting like we're going to do everything in our power to obstruct Donald Trump from destroying our communities. And I really think that means that our movement has to be asking us, and I know that folks don't want me to say Democrats should get more calls. But damn it, if your representative is a Democrat, call your Democrat representative and ask him, what the hell are you doing to defend me? Tell me the concrete ways, and how are you engaging me? And what do you think I should do?
Right.
And so, what I'm telling you is, you need to make those phone calls. We need to flood that Capitol with protest. The fact that the pressure is not felt in the Capitol in the same way. And I think there's also, people are exhausted. People are overwhelmed. People are trying to determine, is this real? Right. And I am telling you, folks, it is as real as the fascism that you have seen all over this world. And they think they can get away with it as long as they weaken us.
And I know we have to be considerate of your time, and you have to roll. And like in that push, how much space do you think we need to have of like stand up to Trump in every way, but also have a thrust that continues past? Because I feel like that's what, from the 2016 administration, that we're fighting Donald Trump, and sometimes it was just superficial or like personality based. And then he loses an election.
That's right.
And now we can actually participate legislatively in ways that actually increase the conditions for Trump to take advantage of.
That's right.
So it wasn't, we are fighting for people. It is like we're fighting against Trump, who's this character that like we want,
So how do we reframe then, Damon, right? We're fighting for Medicaid.
Right.
We're fighting for affordable housing. We're fighting.
They are the danger to that.
We're fighting the villain that wants to take your Social Security, your food, your health care, and your housing away from you. And therefore, Democrats, or whoever it is that wants to represent us, need to demonstrate to us what they're fighting for. Because you have to be clear on what you're fighting, what are you against, and therefore what you're for. And oftentimes our leaders are not clear on both of those things. Right. And I think you're absolutely right. The Donald Trump represents something so much bigger. Don't make him bigger than what he is. He's a big ass head and he's orange, yes. But it is actually the things he represents and the people around him, right? It is this corporate greed that we won't talk about. Is this idea that we allow oligarchs to continue to take from our people. And that didn't start with Donald Trump. And so we have to actually call it for what it is. And we also have to call it for what it is. Like, there is true white supremacy in this moment.
There's white supremacy afoot.
There is.
Yeah.
I can smell it.
I can feel it. I can hear it. I can taste it. What it tastes like, right? But that didn't start with Donald Trump, y'all. Oh my God. I thought that racism and anti-blackness was away when Barack Obama became president. Absolutely not. It's always been there. And therefore we have to be very clear that it is our responsibility to move together, constantly denouncing anti-blackness and white supremacy.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's the same bad guys.
the same. But I also am hopeful. I am hopeful by those that refuse to be overwhelmed and paralyzed by this moment, and those that tell me I have your back. Now go over there, and even if they censure you, they might try to censure me soon. We are going to continue to stand with you, because the moment that you become silent, you become complicit, right? And folks, there were moments in that State of the Union that my biggest regret in that State of the Union was not standing with Al Green and leaving with him. I felt like a coward for not doing that. I don't want to feel like a coward. And I know that I have to extend grace, right? But this moment calls us to radically be grounded on who we are, what we represent, even if there are consequences that come from that, and lean into your movement, into your community to help and flank you when you feel like you're alone.
Well, thank you for having that clarity of who you are and why you're there. It's why we wanted to talk to you. And I'm just so grateful for your time, your generosity, your expertise, and your commitment as we maneuver this messy room together. How can folks find you and your office and your work in the ways y'all would like to be found?
Yeah. Well, first, I'm taking the whole PAL situation. Let's just focus on Social Security, Medicare, housing, right, and food. And if we can focus on those things, I think it's a simple message. We can start cleaning that messy room. So thank you for that. What you could do, I would start by saying, if you know people that are losing funding, organizations, grassroots groups that all of a sudden are getting some notification that their funding is going away or they canceled it because they actually celebrate and embrace diversity, call our office. We want to be able to monitor that and use every authority we have. I think the other piece I would say to you, if you have someone that needs a constituency service, it's a passport. Maybe it's like some challenges with Social Security because there's a threat that they might cut it, or you know someone that is in need of other services. The point is that my office can't directly place you into permanent housing, but we work with organizations that can, right? And so make sure that you're contacting us. And the other is, I'm going to take some hard votes. And some of those hard votes will be to say, I refuse to do the mediocre thing that's not going to actually address the problem. And so flank me. Help me make sure that we're amplifying our message on our socials, yes, on Blue Sky more than on X, on Instagram maybe more. And then continue to mobilize. And when you think it's pertinent, invite me to be part of it. But I want to be there as a partner, not as someone leading that, right? In this moment, our collective leadership will get us through. So invite me when you're doing things. Come meet me in D.C. Come to some of these hearings. Help me make people that are terrible and are trying to silence us uncomfortable for silencing us by just showing up. Folks, I'm being clear. By showing up. I'm not saying you're doing anything else. But those are some ways. And then I think the other piece of that is we're only down by one vote. 2, unfortunately, until they replace the member that just passed away after the State of the Union. But it means that Democrats don't have to keep giving their votes to Republicans without actually getting concessions that protect our people. And so make those calls to some of these districts. Valadeo, Congressman Valadeo in California, y'all. If anyone's listening outside of Chicago, 62% of his constituents depend on Medicaid to get their health care. Why the hell is Valadeo voting to defund Medicaid? Call him, go to his office, and ask him why he doesn't think you deserve to live.
Thank you again so much.
Really grateful for your time. Yeah, moving through it with us.
And we'll be back reshaping culture for the more libertarian creative.
Much love to the people.
Peace.
Peace.